Hey, it's the And Go podcast. We are back, and we are gonna talk about Back to the Future and possibly other things. We're just gonna have a nice meandering conversation. I hope everyone's staying safe. I hope Three Dog is keeping you entertained through these crazy times. Anyway, Back to the Future and go.
Well, since I picked the topic, basically our top 10 soundtracks sort of was kicking around in my head for topics, and there was an excellent Back to the Future documentary on Hulu, which refreshed how awesome Back to the Future was. Here's where I get my one anime slash manga reference. Even the guy who did one of my favorite series, Gans, talked about how epic Back to the Future and how that inspired him to basically do weird sci-fi.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of a science fiction movie, it was kind of a pioneer.
And incredibly wrong at predicting the future, but
True. Yeah, I'm sure we'll get to that. But it was much brighter than a lot of the other science fiction done up until that point, and even done after that. To be honest,
Really, there wasn't a lot of sci-fi that added comedy elements. I mean, I could be wrong, but just off the top of my head, at least at that point, I feel like there wasn't a whole lot that added that kind of comedy side to it.
yeah, that's a good point. It's like a quirky sci-fi movie.
yes, they had a real threat with him disappearing in the first movie. And why it might be a little derivative to visit the first movie, I think that was a good concept for the sequel. At least for the bit that they did. I think that really put some punch. The third movie, I'm iffy on. It was a good movie, but felt out of place.
I like how they kept it contained to the same town. I think that was a smart move instead of
Yeah,
Trying to do a
like Clara
grand scale.
Barton Pass or whatever. I thought that whole thing was pretty well worked in. Ooh, here's something that's kind of a jump off. How do you guys feel about the DeLorean? I think I heard that. Well, first of all, the original DeLorean failed for several. The DeLorean was like a coke dream of John DeLorean or whatever the fuck his name was. Um, and it failed mainly because if you pull, into a grocery store parking lot, you can't get out of your goddamn car because there isn't clearance to open the doors. Um, and that stainless steel exterior, I understand, got really hot. Um, but I think I've heard rumblings and grumblings here and there over the last few years about them trying to bring it back, or at least a modernized version. It's kind of interesting.
that'd be
Well,
cool.
they do
It's
have
it,
those They sort of have those doors on certain cars, but those are high-end
yeah.
cars.
Tesla actually has one of the Teslas has doors like that.
Oh, let's not get into
Interesting.
talking about Elon Musk here.
Okay.
Old Uncle Elon.
Yep.
Yeah, because I know the Lamborghini kind of solved that by having them open.
Like slightly out and then upward, yeah. Instead
Yeah,
of like,
yeah, horizontally. Yeah,
not like the wings, yeah.
yeah.
I don't know, man. A DeLorean's always been on that particular car's been on my like top 5 list for sure. Like if I ever hit the lottery or whatever, that would be one of the things that I would
Yeah.
one of the cars that I would definitely purchase.
Yeah, there was a lot
Yeah,
of
I think
people on the documentary who were DeLorean owners, or as they say, time machine owners. There's a lot of people who just bought the DeLorean to pretty much make their own time machine.
there's an episode of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee where I don't remember who the guest was, but the Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, Jerry Seinfeld rents some exotic car and picks up a comedian and they drive around. And they rented a DeLorean and it like broke down halfway through the shoot. And thankfully they had like a backup DeLorean ready to go.
How do they have a backup DeLorean?
It's madness, right?
Well, the
Yeah.
It was just like
movies
on
went
a
through
pickup
seven
truck or whatever.
DeLoreans.
Really? Why?
They just it's Hollywood. They of course have backups. How many Batmobiles do you think there were?
Yeah, but like, what happened to the other ones? Did they just break down, or were they not?
No, they
You
were
mean all the
fine.
movies, or
Yes, between the three movies, I hear there were
oh well,
seven used.
you've got like ones that are because you have like the original, and then they remember he like retools it for the second one with the Mister Fusion, and
Yep,
so it's probably like the different builds that they make for it.
and I'm
The one
pretty
with
sure.
all the train shit on it.
I'm pretty sure they have at least two for each movie, just in case one breaks down. They can use the other, because shoots really are time consuming, and if you don't get your, if something breaks down and you don't have a way to replace it, you lose a lot of time in some of these movie shoots. So I'm sure they had at least one backup per movie, and the remodeled versions.
I think the only instance of even like a pet being consistently the same pet that I've ever heard of was Frasier, where that the dog was the same dog in every episode of Frasier. Normally, that's not the case, is what I understand.
Oh, Lassie, I believe, had just the one dog, but
No, I don't think
I
that's
don't think
accurate.
so. No,
Nah.
in fact, I think it was like 12 of them or some shit.
It was several Lassie.
okay, urban legend.
What,
Sorry.
what kind of name is Lassie anyway? Oh,
Irish?
like yeah, I was gonna say. Okay,
Lassie.
so it makes sense now. Sure.
I was gonna say I think also a lot of them were male.
Yeah, I believe that's the case.
I wonder if the dog was ever kind of pissed. Like, did you just call me a girl? What do you mean?
Yeah.
Go fucking alert the farmers, girl.
You can stay your ass down that well, Timmy.
Yeah, yeah. Don't you see this mighty red rocket cock?
Oh man.
Sorry.
Oh man.
Oh, by the way, as you're listening to this, massive listening audience, I'm probably
Dave.
Hi, Dave. I'm probably drunk on crabs right now because this is Friday and I'm making a seafood day tomorrow. So.
Besides the time machine, what thing from Back to the Future would you want in your life? Maybe the Mr. Fusion? I'm sure that would be really good for the environment. Turn trash into nuclear power? Damn. Two problems all in one. I still would go with the hoverboard. Or the car that flies. Probably the car that flies. That'd just be cooler. They were talking, people don't want a car that
Roads?
flies.
Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Exactly.
Fucking Don Cheadle like rolls his eyes.
I want to see the cops pull over someone on a hoverway. That would be funny. Get out of the vehicles, sir. Yeah, you want me to fall to my death?
I'd like that sweet 1950s Epiphone guitar that he played in Back to the Future 1. That'd be great because it's probably worth $25,000.
Of course, the banker would go straight to money.
Well, I'm also the musician, lest you forget.
Oh,
I'm also the creative one, so
Oh,
yeah, the
God.
creative one, yeah.
Yeah,
checking all the boxes here.
got it. Forgot about that. All your stories about weird road trips and drink. Let me edit that out, maybe.
There were several gigs we played where we played for literally just the people working in the club. So it wasn't all glamour, guys. It wasn't all drinking and driving and fucking playing on French soil, okay? It was a lot of
Oh my gosh.
playing for no one. Getting there early and setting up light shows to play for literally no one. A lot of that. Good times, though. Whatever.
Yeah. Fake it until you make it. But yeah,
Exposure.
I mean, that movie really had an epic history behind it. Documentary, it had the old fart from Rick and Morty and Community creation. I don't even want to say his name. Of course, it was he was joking about it. He was like, all movies are shit in comparison to Back to the Future nowadays. Who went on the
Well,
whole
did we ever
rant.
get... Did we get what Bill would want from the Back to the Future universe?
I'm trying to go through some of the stuff. I don't know, because there are actually there's a few things that you could get, right? There's the big like projection TVs, which And the VR glasses that they wear, when they answer the phone and shit. Like,
Yeah.
technically, there's a lot of that stuff. Actually, at one point, it'd be cool to have these now, just because they came out. They recreated the self-lacing shoes at one
Yeah, I
point.
was going to mention that. Yeah. A
Yeah, I
couple years
wish I would
ago.
have been able to get my hands on a pair of those. That would have been cool. Um, probably Brian's probably right. Probably the Mr. Fusion. I mean, how awesome would it be to go out to your car, throw some banana peels in there, and not have to worry about going and getting gas, and then have your
Fantastic.
car
Yeah.
fucking fly away? I mean, that's pretty hard to beat. Other than a time machine, of course. So that'd be everybody's pick.
Yeah. Go back
I
and
would
kill Hitler.
ruin.
I think
I would not do
everyone
well
would
with a
try
time
to do
machine.
it if it wouldn't destroy the space-time continuum.
I can pick some people in more recent history, but I digress.
I like Doctor Who's version of it. They weren't going to kill Hitler because it would break the time stream, but there was this police force that was in like this shape-shifting robot. Many people in a shape-shifting robot who went back to basically just torture evil people. They were like
Should
they
have just
were
taken some pictures of him in a compromising position and released them. It's really all you have to do with people like that.
well for
Yeah, I
some
do
people
like the
that wouldn't
ethical-
hurt them.
The ethical quandary of, would you murder a baby in its crib? I mean, butterfly effect. Maybe even if, you went back in time and befriended a young Hitler and told him you were a Jew, would that have... You were a Jew homosexual and also a black guy. Would that have changed? Because I think he hated literally everyone, right? That
Yeah.
wasn't...
So what you're saying is send a gay Sammy Davis Jr. back in time to talk to
Oh
Hitler.
my God! Yes! Hey, babe, listen here. It's a great painting you got there, Hitler, baby.
We should write that film. There you go.
Yes! Okay, so first you go back in time to get Sammy Davis Jr.
Yeah.
Then you tell him that he's going to have to suck a dick for America. And then send conditioned to be gay Sammy Davis Jr. back. Or Lenny Kravitz. You could probably have an easier time with Lenny Kravitz because he's like half
Okay.
half Jewish, right?
There
And
you
he's a
go.
rock star,
Yeah.
so he's probably had at least one homosexual experience. I like this idea.
He just
actually.
shows up, tells Hitler that he likes his art. Bada bing, bada boom.
Absolutely. Oh my God, he respects me. But then, what if Hitler goes the other way and tries to then murder all the non-Jews?
Yeah.
All
I
the
only
non-
like black gay Jews now. Right?
Kravitz? He's my best friend.
Obviously, they're the master race. Right? Like, oh, God.
They appreciate the artwork, so obviously they're the ones with all their fucking shit together.
Well, that would be
Oh,
harder
God,
to
that'd
sell
be
in
terrible.
Germany, so that would be funny to see.
I've never actually looked at one of Hitler's paintings. I'm going to look one up now. I'm probably going to wind up on a list for this.
I know, right? The FBI's watching you now.
I hope they're listening too, so they understand the context. I mean, some of these aren't bad. Typical German shit. A lot of fucking mountains. There's a goddamn state building. Actually, some of these are kind of good. I'm not gonna lie.
But that's a good.
Which is a whole.
How do you separate
That-
the artist from the artiste?
Yes, I was gonna say the
art
same
from the
thing.
artist.
Yeah.
But what do you guys think of the culture? They aren't as big as Trekkies, but Back to the Future fans are some. As I said, there's plenty of time machine owners out there. There's even tribute bands. I think they're called Flux Capacitor. Reminds me like a fledgling Trekkie community, the smaller Back to the Future crowd. I mean, Back to the Future did not as large as a franchise as, of course, Star Trek.
Yeah, I never really encountered anything about them. I mean, I feel like there's a following for it. Pretty much anything you can think of, there's going to be some group that takes it to that level, but I've just never encountered people who are that big of fans, unless they're just an '80s movie fan.
Yeah, I've run across a lot of or a handful. I've run across more hardcore Ghostbusters people than I have hardcore Back to the Future people. And I it's Back to the Future is beautiful because it's pure. You know, it has yet to be retouched with a remake. They didn't keep making sequels. You know, there was the cartoon, the Saturday morning cartoon, which is not altogether bad.
Yeah, the
Um,
DeLorean fitting in a backpack was the funny thing to me. Them trying to pick up the little. It was a suitcase, and the suitcase weighed the same amount. That's what I remember from
oh,
that.
I'd rather have that time traveling train than the time traveling DeLorean, to be honest.
But it's so inconvenient. The
What do you
DeLorean
mean?
had
It's
to.
roomier.
Well, maybe for travel, but you need a train track to get that
Guess
thing
that's
to
true.
work.
Did it fly?
It did fly.
Oh yeah, I did at the end. I forgot about that. Okay, I stand corrected.
Which kind of defeats the purpose of it coming in on the railroad tracks, but whatever. They needed
Yeah.
that cool scene where the arms go down on the track, and nothing there.
It must have been a pain in the ass to land on the fucking train track too.
Right? No,
You gotta line it up.
Left, yeah.
Ugh. I think, quick side note, I think trains are the greatest invention of all time. I think more than anything else, outside of the wheel, the train, the locomotive, spurred more advancement in society than any another podcast, perhaps. But
Yeah, that'd be interesting to discuss. It was definitely one of them.
Yeah,
Especially
airplane.
as far as-
Airplane. I think had a more significant. But if you're talking about an earlier era, yes, airplane. I think had the most significant because just the time, the distance.
yeah, at least in modern culture, it's like the Beatles of inventions. Because I think, and I did a little research, but I think I could argue that without the train, you wouldn't have any of the other groundbreaking inventions that we then had. Whether it be because moving rare materials was easier, or I don't know.
Well, you could argue
I don't know.
the steam powered engine was what made really the train work. So
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
everything
The
comes
steam
back.
powered engine is really the nuts and bolts of it. You're right.
Yeah, it was just an application of the engine came up at the time. Well, the engine in general, they were steam powered. I think trains were typically coal power, unless you have that super log to get the train up to 88.
Yeah, right.
Super logs.
Hmm.
It's gonna destroy the engine, but it should get up to 88 miles per hour. I always found that fascinating and sort of realistic. Time machines. Because of, mathematical equations. I thought that the speed was the key to time travel. I thought that was actually quite cool. Also, how that played into flux capacitor. But E equals mc squared. You need the three components. Was it speed, mass, and velocity? Or I got that wrong, I'm sure, but
I know it's been covered several times before. Isn't it weird how Marty McFly's mom and dad had a kid that looked just like the guy that originally took Marty's mom to prom, and no one seemed to question it?
Yeah. No one noticed. Nothing.
well, you're talking about you have the original timeline, then you have the alternate timeline. Okay, you forget about the alternate.
Yeah, but still. No. But in the alternate timeline, Marty goes back at the end of Back to the Future 1, right? And he still looks the same. And his parents come in and they're grab assing and whatnot. And that's the timeline where, Marty McFly's dad punched out Biff and, changed their relationship from the foundation. And, and that's the timeline in which Marty McFly went back. So that is weird that, honey, doesn't he look like that guy that took you to prom?
But when did he
Originally,
start
that-
looking like that? That's the question. He would have looked
Immediately,
completely
I mean...
No, as a kid, no. Kids change completely
okay,
from
so
childhood.
even-
Maybe once he started hitting 5, 6, 7, maybe not until puberty did he look like that guy.
My thought is more like, you're sitting there looking through some photo albums, and then you come across one that's of Marty when he's like, in high school, and you start thinking back, and you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Does this father you're like, did you sleep with Calvin Klein? Is this
what did
kid?
What did you like?
See,
Find him at the grocery store and...
That's more realistic. That I agree
Yeah.
with, but that would be on the alternative timeline. And the father was more confident in the alternative line, so...
I have a bigger problem with the time travel itself, and I know that every time travel movie has its issues. But there's a couple of things. So, one, in that alternate timeline, when Marty returns, right, having fixed his parents and has the better version of his life, there's so many issues. One, like, they live in the same house, even though his parents are wealthier, bunch of other junk like that, But him coming back before he sees himself leave again creates so many time paradoxes, because that's going right there, that will create a loop. But two, so what happens when that Marty from this timeline, now the second created timeline, goes back? What happens then?
It just repeats the process.
So that creates a paradox, an infinite loop.
It creates an infinite loop that goes on.
But my point is when he goes back, at what point does he go? He goes theoretically back to the same exact spot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how does that work? Because the first Marty shows back up before because he changes the time, right? But theoretically, the one from the new timeline is going back.
Just left.
Going back to the same.
And then he's got to come
spot.
back.
Right.
Yeah.
Which means that they, laws of physics can't occupy the same space and the same time. So that'd be a huge issue,
Well,
but you also have him going back with all of being raised in that second timeline, all the knowledge of it. So his viewpoints on his parents and everything else is completely different. He's got a completely different story from his father and from his mother of how they met, with the whole thing with Biff. The whole deal is completely different for him.
Childhood vacations? Oh, Marty, don't you remember that trip to Napa that we took? No, I don't, Dad. I remember the fucking trip to Waterworld we took,
I like Wally World better as an example, but go on.
So, his life is completely different. Would he even be friends with Doc Brown?
Yeah, good question. Probably not, because he wasn't seeking a positive male influence. Yeah.
Right. I don't know. Just there's a whole bunch. That second Marty that he sees leave from Lone Pine Mall has a completely different view of the entire past. So by the time he gets back there, all of that stuff that happened wouldn't make any sense to him.
Sure, if you can fix the past and fix the future, then that means that things are irrevocably different. I feel kind of bad for Biff, by the way.
Well, and I think the biggest part of that is see the whole turn of events comes from when Marty pushes his father out of the way because he knows his grandfather hit him with the car, right? So if he was never told that story because his parents actually met at the dance, weeks later, there would be no incentive for him to go there and then push his father out of the way, right? He wouldn't know anything about that. And he would, obviously would probably see the other Marty too. I don't know, depending on how the time travel thing works.
No, but there's alternate timelines. The multiverse theory could explain how this works out.
Possibly, but with it going back to the point before the timeline skewed off, I'm not sure whether or not, or they actually would be the exact point where the other timeline skewed off. But even still, none of that would happen because he wouldn't have been told those stories growing up.
No, I don't think I don't think the story had him push his dad out of the way. I think he just saw the guy fall.
Well, the first time he does.
Yeah.
Okay.
He sees his father and he's like, "Oh, my father's a peeping Tom." And then he sees the car coming and he's like, "Oh shit, this is where he gets hit," and runs and pushes him out of the way, and he's the one that gets hit.
Yeah.
But see, none of that would happen because he wouldn't
Yeah,
go
in
searching, you know.
back in his original timeline, that never happened, which is why his parents are happier.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
It
that's a
is
good
an
point.
interesting
So
theory.
you're like, holy crap.
It is a hole that it
And
could
I feel
work,
like
and
they wouldn't have had to have done any of that if they just had Marty come back at the same point where he left.
probably.
Because
he-
then you could argue that that's part of the skewed timeline, that maybe even none of that even happens this time around.
Sure,
But
and
by
then they
get
get to see the alternate universe
Right.
where they are happier. So Marty's like, oh, it's good to know that in some universe. And then Marty looks completely different.
Yeah.
Maybe he doesn't look different, but I don't know.
Well, it is possible the timeline did not actually shift over until Marty came back. So up to that point, the timeline that Marty comes back to doesn't change immediately. Remember
But it
how
does
he starts
because
to
there's
fade?
Lone Pine Mall. The sign says Lone Pine Mall, not Twin Pines Mall.
Oh, okay.
So it has already shifted.
Good
In
point.
fact, they make a point of showing that.
Okay.
And even if Marty never went back to his house, his parents are still better.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. They should have found a way for him to come back either the moment he left or shortly afterward. That way, you kind of fix a lot of that, paradox stuff.
I
you know.
understand, but he also wanted to save Doc. He didn't think Doc read a message, so he was going to
Yeah.
save Doc. That's why he set the time back more.
Yeah.
And that might have blown a hole in the universe. I think Doc was worried about that also.
Yeah.
I think that scene in the rain where that Western Union guy comes to deliver the message that's been sitting in the office for 70 years or whatever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think that's one of my favorite scenes in all of cinema. Are you Marty McFly? And he
Yeah.
reaches in his coat and pulls out
Yeah,
the
oh,
letter
shit.
or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think they did a much better job with the time travel in the second one, if you ask me. Like they were far more aware of that kind of butterfly effect, and they and the him explaining how the timeline skewed off into a new timeline. I think they did a much better job, sitting down and thinking through the time travel in the second movie.
Yeah. They definitely had it. The first movie was a one-off. I think it was more of a comedy. The sequel, they had to start taking seriously. In fact, in the documentary, they're like, we wouldn't have had Marty's girlfriend get in the car if we were sure we were going to do a sequel, because we just put her to sleep. Remember how they put her to sleep? The reason they
Yep.
explained is they had nothing to do. They had nothing for her to do. And the ending was sort of a mistake. I think they had plans for a sequel, but Hollywood, they want to see if things are successful before they go through. Well, they
She probably
used
wanted
to.
too much money.
No, the writers had nothing for her to do. I guess they had an idea of what they had in mind, but they couldn't work it into when they did the sequel.
So the Marty that Marty visits in the future, is that the same Marty that traveled back in time?
So, you mean the one that he saw leave?
No, so like in the second one, I guess it was when they go forward in time and Marty sees himself and he gets fired, right? He gets fired via fax, wearing his two ties like a fucking retard.
Yeah.
I guess we should edit that word out. Like a fucking moron, he's wearing two ties. Is that Marty that got fired a Marty that went back in time when he was 17 or whatever?
It would have to be, because both the one on the current timeline, which is him coming back, and the one that leaves. So theoretically, if he came back and somehow replaced the Marty, then yes. So the timeline would skew again when Doc comes back a second time from the future to pick him back up. So yeah, that Marty has time traveled at some point.
So how is that Marty such a broken
Right?
shell of a man?
Because
He's experienced time travel, for Pete's sake.
I don't think
You would
he's
think
gone
that-
through this loop. He's not the same Marty. He's not the same version of Marty who goes back to the future. Who goes to the
Back-
future
I
with
think
Doc.
it has to be though.
No.
because Doc comes back to the point right after he gets back. Right, it's
But-
literally the next day.
But Doc.
Yeah.
Wakes up.
But think about it this way: Doc
Well, what other
comes
Marty
back.
is on that timeline?
Doc comes back because of the sun. If Marty didn't get in that accident and led a different life, the sun probably would not be in the same.
But none of that has changed until after Marty decides having future knowledge to avoid the accident. So that part of the timeline hasn't skewed off yet.
So did future Marty's parents have a good relationship or a bad relationship?
A
They had a good one.
relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying he went through the future Marty went through that first movie, but he did not go through the second movie, or else.
No,
Even still.
no, but he had time traveled in the first movie. Yes.
Yes, I agree.
Well, that's what
Talking
Mike
about
was
time
asking.
travel. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did go through the first movie, but he didn't experience what the Marty in the second movie experienced. That would just
It just
No.
blows my mind that he would end up being this shell of a man after having a better upbringing because of his happy and fulfilled parents that are wealthier.
Who theoretically now loaded, right? Yeah.
well, he
Yeah,
still would have
yeah.
been. He got. I think maybe he got sued for the accident that he caused. Also,
Yeah, that was what it was supposed to have been. That he was in the poorhouse because he got sued after wrecking into that dude's car. It was like a Rolls Royce or something.
Right.
yes, time travel
Okay.
is always difficult. The third movie actually makes time travel a lot simpler. Okay, it was as I said, it didn't seem to fit in with the trilogy, but
I like the third one a lot. Whenever it comes on HBO or whatever, I stop and watch it. I wouldn't watch it on TNT or whatever with commercials, but
I love the tie-in with the Clint Eastwood movie because in the second film, that's the one Biff is watching in the hot tub.
yeah, for sure. I want to say that was Fistful of Dollars. Or I think it was The Pale Rider. I don't know.
it doesn't matter. I don't remember. So if it's Clint Eastwood, I'll agree with you. I don't remember that detail. But Billy's the movie buff. He can recite a lot of movies. Ninja Turtles. What else can you do, Bill?
Oh god, there's a few of them, but Ninja Turtles is probably the worst one. I could sit in every freaking line. It's like burned in my brain.
It's either Ghostbusters or Back to the Future that you're pretty close. You're not exact.
Back to the Future is probably the one where the first one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he always takes an interest in Alias. Calvin Klein, Clint Eastwood. I wonder if they made a fourth movie, he would have been Martha Stewart or something. Would have chose Martha Stewart or something.
Martha Stewart! Scones!
It's a future where gender is no longer a concept. What would they? Yeah, if they tried to make a fourth one, how would they even do it? So you have the first movie, he goes back to the 50s. You have the second one where he goes to a completely debunked future. How could they even go to the same future again? I think they would either have to jump back to the past if they tried to do a sequel, or they
Also,
would go
wanna
to a
interject
far future.
That the alternative timeline future is very accurate. So as much as people get mad about the no flying cars, well, we got the alternative one. So that's
Sure.
the timeline. We're stuck in the skewed timeline.
Yeah.
And the only difference is some jackass gets a book to make him rich. I'm not going to say any more than that.
Owns a casino, hotel, has stupid hair. It's very vulgar. It's a moron, but somehow still rich, powerful, ruins everything.
Borderline, if not actual rapist.
Bunch of idiots running around with guns.
Slackers!
Yeah. But I digress.
Sure. Yeah, a darker Back to the Future would be, I mean, just like any other gritty reboot. Okay, so real quick, I just thought of this. I appreciate the naming conventions of each movie. You got Back to the Future, you got Back to the Future 2, you got Back to the Future 3. There's no fucking subline. It's like Back to the Future, this time it's in the West or whatever, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a very straightforward naming convention. I appreciate that. Uh,
Oh man, I just thought of a super sad one. Where they just went
ooh.
totally real and came back and he like took Marty into the future to try to like cure his Parkinson's.
Oh, shit.
That is.
Yeah, man. Just total like dark tearjerker Back to the Future, man.
Marty,
Yeah.
we're going into the future so that they can
did-
test your blood at the lab, and they're going to find the early onset of Parkinson's disease, and they're going to
Yeah.
give you the cure, which is only available in 2050,
Yeah, yeah.
so you can not be all shaky when you go to shoot the home intruder that is threatening you and whatever the girlfriend's name was,
Yeah, yeah.
because then you accidentally shoot your child, Marty, because of the Parkinson's.
That's messed up. So messed up.
You took
Okay.
us here, Bill.
No, I did. Well, then Bill took it to the next level.
No, Bill took us to Parkinson's disease.
Yeah.
Okay, Brian?
I'm just
Don't
saying,
take that away from
like,
him.
Tell me you wouldn't watch that dramatic version of Back to the Future and be sitting there in the theater fucking crying your eyes out about it.
Hey, I was just say I would go to the theater to watch that, and
Yeah.
those that know me know that that's a big deal because I don't go to the theater really.
On a side
Plus,
note,
Christopher Lloyd's like old as hell now, so you know it's gonna.
And he's not aged super well.
Yeah,
He just looks
yeah.
very thin. He just looks very thin. I don't know.
They
On
both need somebody else to drive. You know.
That's where the girlfriend comes in.
There
Finally,
you
the
go.
writers
Yeah,
can figure it out.
yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
okay, on a side note, Mike,
Yeah.
Jay and Silent Bob reboots on Amazon, and I tried to watch it, and it was god
then?
awful.
I'm sure
So
it
did you
was.
close
It
the
was
chapter
pretty
on
much.
it?
It was pretty
Close
much.
the book on it.
The camera's a little far away. Let me just. I don't know if you can see me roll my eyes.
Okay, but yeah, it really was just a jerk off session. It seemed like most of the movie.
I'm sure it was. Just
They-
stop, Kevin Smith.
they had.
Stop, man.
It really was bad. Kevin Smith.
He probably has all those medical bills after the heart attack, and I understand that. But like, go write a comic book. Fucking team up with Max Landis and try to revive that douchebag's career. I take it back. Max Landis is the worst human being on earth. Well, he's pretty bad anyway.
Sure who that is.
He wrote that one Superman story, American Alien. That's like
Okay.
his claim to fame. He's John Landis's son, and he's just the worst.
I only hear about really bad people in comic books, like America Chavez. There's a lot of bad.
America! Fuck
Fuck
yeah.
I only hear about the cringy comic book stuff. I mean, is there much else? I don't know. I don't read enough comic books, but of course.
A fun Back to the Future 4 might have been the Doc's kids being like maybe the Doc and Clara die eventually, obviously. And their kids are just like either stranded somewhere in time and or just very unprepared for the real world. Because I understand she was a school teacher, and he was a scientist, but I'm sure they didn't get the full fucking course of education that they should have,
It's also interesting that they were raising them with like in the 1900s or 19th century as it were. I mean, so they had all the 1800s clothing and stuff on. I'm like, so you could time travel even far into the future because now your train flies, so you've done that. But still, your children
Yeah.
talk like creepy little. It's from
We're
Little
gonna-
House on the Prairie.
Risk our kids getting lupus and smallpox or whatever.
Well, you're
For
assuming
continuity.
that they've had time travel for a long time before Doc makes his appearance. How long would it take to make a train into a time travel machine?
Well, no,
But they
and
were
that's
like
true,
10
but
and
it's
8.
flying, so he had to go into the future to get the
Yeah.
equipment to make it fly.
Maybe he just went to the future, got the stuff, then came back and
Just
checked on
popped
Marty.
into like a Jiffy Lube, a U-Fly 24 hours, you know,
It'd be like
With a fucking train.
with a train,
Yeah.
It'd be like, this
Were there
is a new
tracks
one.
there when he got the upgrade?
right?
Did he have to wait to get the materials to? Because he needed fucking uranium in the first one.
Yeah.
So did he
I guess
have to
maybe
wait?
went and was mining it himself and wherever the hell he was.
Sure. Yeah.
That is a good question. And the third one, yes, they had the speed, but where did he get the power? Oh, they were pushing
Yeah.
the DeLorean with the Mr. Fusion. Maybe he
Right.
maybe he rebuilt the Mr. Fusion out of the parts.
Or the train.
Or he knew how to make a Mr. Fusion. He's a scientist. I mean, he didn't know
I don't think they
how
had
to...
plastic yet.
Well,
There's
who's
so
saying
many
you
things, yeah.
couldn't make it a primitive version of the Mr. Fusions? Maybe a one-shot thing? I mean,
It's got like sticks and some
Yeah,
tar
cast
on it.
iron.
I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure it took him several years to find a way to generate the power he needed and the parts. After, I'm just saying, he probably came-
Honestly, a better ending, I think, would have been him and Clara get together. Okay, that's fine. But then, like, Marty goes back to the future. That's fine too. Don't race the guy. Cool. But then maybe it cuts back to Clara and Doc just living a simple life in the fucking 19th century. And
Should have been like Marty in his like the library at his school, like reading Doc Brown inventing stuff, in a
Yes,
book.
there you go.
history
Yeah,
book. Yeah.
and his lovely wife, Clara, had to change her name, maybe,
Yeah.
because everyone presumes you're dead. Him and his lovely wife, Beth. I don't know. Beth's kind of a weird name.
You're the one who brought up that name.
I mean, Elizabeth, all right, fine. But Beth? Just Beth?
Yeah, people are just getting lazier with naming, so.
Sorry to all the Beths out there. Your name is great.
My
It's really not, though.
niece's name Elizabeth.
Yeah, Elizabeth is fine. But not just Beth, It's like naming your child Mike. Just Mike is his birth name. I understand Michael to Mike.
Nope. Grab a Mike's.
Literally Bob. Bob is your child's name.
Bobaverse. You guys should read it or listen to it on Audible.
No!
Why is that,
Stop
Mike?
pushing this.
I pushed it once. Maybe
The only
twice.
Bobaverse I know is Titan AE.
Bobby's World.
Yeah, Bobby's World, sure. Man, 2 ties are dumb. I don't want to wear 1 tie. I gotta wear 2.
You're fixated
Although-
on that, Mike. All the styles in the future were purposely ridiculous to at least the 80s. That's the funny thing. It was the 80s when they created this movie. So we make fun of the 80s for ridiculous styles. Maybe that was a commentary on if the ridiculous outfits of the 80s continued, what would it be in 20 years? Ever think about that, gents?
No, I think we're gonna go through another retro phase. I don't know. It's crazy that the 90s are as far away now as the 70s were in the 90s.
Yeah. It's crazy. I think about
Yeah.
that a lot with cars.
Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah.
Because the 70s muscle car has long been held as like the pinnacle of, race cars and that kind of stuff, aesthetically and power-wise and stuff like that. And then you think about growing up, looking at all those cars and thinking, oh, those are really cool old cars. But now you're like, well, it's actually just like a 90s Toyota Tercel.
Fucking Ford Taurus. Wow, great. Looks
Yeah,
like an oval. Yeah.
I still remember my hatred for the PT Cruiser. I don't know why that car
Yeah.
pissed me off. It wasn't even a car. It was like old. It tried to be retro in style, but just looked retarded.
I kind of want to go out and buy a '70s muscle car now because if I happen to make it another fucking 50 years, which is not looking too good, guys. But if I do, it'd be kind of cool to have a 100-year-old car just sitting in the garage.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
I need a garage.
Yeah, first
All right,
you need a garage. Right?
This weekend, if you want to come by, I'm going to get some concrete. We can lay the foundation for a garage. I got a spot for it. It's going to be cool.
You have
Obviously,
a spot
I'm not gonna
for
do
it?
that. Yeah, right on the side of the house.
Okay.
Mike, I'm back from the future. Something happened to your car, right? Your
No!
crappy garage fell in on it.
No! Is it because I built it by hand? Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
You're not really good with handy stuff. It's actually
don't
just like
park your car in there, right? That's it. That's all I really had to say.
I'm from literally the day you put the car in. I'm from you. I'm from the future, by which I mean like 8 months from now.
Yeah.
When the project is done and you put your car in for the first time, it literally just fucking collapses in on itself.
So
Because you cut corners with your construction.
You're not good enough to make a garage, but you're good enough to make a time machine in 8 months. You see the paradox?
Yes. Well, see, when the garage collapses, it collapses in such a way to where it creates a wormhole.
Yeah.
Fucking
A quantum wormhole. You got to make it more spacey, right?
yeah. Einstein Rosenberg bridge wormhole gateway fucking quantum processing cellium. I don't know.
Heimdall, right?
Well,
Heimdall.
well,
It creates a Heimdall bridge back to the rainbow level. Rainbow fucking
I
okay,
was
you're
just really
just
high for like 8 months.
stoned for 8 months.
well, the doctor did hit his head. That's where he got the idea for the flux capacitor. So I can see it in this fictional world where you actually have a old car and actually have the energy.
He was
and
already pretty
time
smart,
to
though, the
make
doc.
a garage. Yeah, he was an eccentric genius.
When you were asphyxiating yourself with fucking a string of Christmas lights, you saw.
Oh shit! So it's in my bathroom. You see, right? Were you trying to hang a clock on the wall and you slipped and fell and hit your head on the corner of the sink?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
That's absolutely what was
trying to make
happening.
the greatest gravity bong ever. No, I wouldn't do
That's
that.
totally better than slightly choking myself with my belt hung around the towel bar, right?
Yes, I was not trying to put my dick in the sink in the bathroom. Yes.
Am I gonna have to edit all this out?
No, this is
Probably.
fine. I was not putting my dick in the water tank in the toilet and then flushing for the suction.
So you're telling me you want this published on YouTube?
Yeah, fuck it, I don't care, man.
Okay,
Oh, gosh.
I'm just trying to clear it up now.
I got a 3-day weekend coming. All fucking bets are off. I don't actually fucking asphyxiate myself with. There's a string of Christmas lights right here, so that's how that came to be.
Almost
And
made me
now they're
spill my beer all over my computer.
Here, there's verification for you. Got some Christmas lights right here.
Sorry for taking it to that spot. You know, it was just
No, it's
natural
fucking
progression.
hilarious. Yeah.
It's the power of love. Supposedly that song was made for the movie. They're like, Huey
I don't know
Lewis
that
in
song.
the news. We want you to create a song. Does it have to be about time travel? No, just do it about whatever.
Although they did do Back in Time.
Gonna go back in time. Well, thanks for tuning in, guys. We had some laughs. Talking about Back to the Future and other random time travel related and sexual kink related things. I hope you had fun. We had fun. Don't forget to check us out every Tuesday and Friday for another interesting podcast. We'll be back next week. Enjoy your weekend. Stay safe. Tell 3Dog I said hi. Don't forget to tell us how much you were offended by our asphyxiation riff. in the comments. And we'll see you next time. Bye.